Hey everybody, Jonathan Broadbent here, your host of UnWoke Academy. Welcome to another episode. Today we're going to do a deep dive into portfolios and how people invest, some of the things to watch out for with Woke Wall Street. This is going to be a kind of a master's thesis level conversation, but we're going to make it bite-sized and understandable. If you have any questions, as always, you can send notes to me directly, ask questions, or post them in the comments on whatever platform you're viewing this video on. I'd love to answer your questions and make sure that everything we talk about is clear, understandable, and actionable. The first thing to know is that during the Biden administration, I know we don't like to look back on that. We have hope for the future, but some things happened that are really relevant and very specifically important to where the investment markets are, where the capital markets are. And what do I mean when I say capital markets? That can sound a little bit confusing. Capital markets is really where the money is. Who gets the investment dollars? So to put the stock market, and I'm sort of air quoting that because there are lots of different stock markets, to put the investment market in perspective, think of it this way. There used to be, if you wanted to borrow money to be in business or to expand your business or grow or start a business, you would go really probably first to friends and family, and then you would go to a bank and borrow money. And that's certainly still an option, both of those. However, the stock market gives an opportunity for we, the people, to invest and hopefully invest wisely and reap a reward for investing smartly in companies that grow. Really, at its core, that's the intention of the stock market. You and me and average rank and file people who have an IRA or 401k somewhere or whatever investment vehicle, we get to buy into great American companies. And no, it's not just American companies. You can now buy in trade in companies all over the world. But let's do it smartly. And part of that is recognizing our enemies. There are bad people out there that would love to take your money. I'm sorry, that's just part of life. And that's not just the stock market. There are lots of places where people would love to take your money and they want to take as much as possible with as little work as possible. The stock market, unfortunately, represents an opportunity for some bad actors to do some nefarious things. And there are all kinds of things once you go in the rabbit hole, it's like anything else. There are all kinds of schemes that people have dreamt up through the years in order to capture and take your money. The more you know those, and the more you understand what they are and how they work, the less likely you are to fall victim to these things. My job for decades now has been to research, examine, and report on those for big institutions. I work in an area of finance that is institutional finance. That's my background. That's how I formed my company, the one that's been under attack for 3.5 years by weaponized regulators, but whatever. That's my skill set, and that's where I focus. What I'm seeing in the markets is a mass consolidation of capital markets. Now, thinking again in terms of capital markets being what companies get financed, what companies get the money, because it's the money that allows businesses to grow, thrive, and flourish. It wasn't small companies. It was mega cap globalist companies got massive amounts. They got huge cash infusion. So those companies that played well with all the woke stuff, the DEI, CRT, ESG, all that woke stuff, all these things, they sound wonderful and they're exactly the opposite. They're horrible and destructive. And those things were happening for a reason. Those were kind of the levers, the social pressure that allowed Wall Street, for lack of a blanket general term, or globalist banks, or whatever you want to call the people, the big power brokers that manage most of the big money, BlackRock included, it allowed those entities to twist the thumb screws and force the capital, any money, into only a select few places. Well, I'm going to give you an example of that. We have what's been referred to as the Magnificent Seven. That's a catchphrase meant to distract you and make you think that there are these 7 glorious companies that deserve the lion's share of everybody's money from all over the world, as if investing in those is going to solve your retirement planning needs. That's hogwash and nonsense. They are, in my estimation, and I've talked about this in the globalist bubble episode, vastly overfunded, which means everybody's money is all in the same small number of companies all over the world, with exceptions, of course, but there's a small number of companies, and we keep talking about them, and you know them. These are not the companies that smart investors are investing their money in. You might have a little bit, just in case maybe Apple, Google, Amazon, Microsoft, whatever, that small little clique of vastly overfunded companies do well. But here's the thing. The 2024 elections happened, and that has a global impact. It's taking a while for we, the people, to sort of catch up to what's happening in financial markets. But I've been thinking in terms of a possible Trump win since long before November 2024, and what the implications would be. And whatever you might want to call this conversation, you might call it a Trump-aligned portfolio or whatever. I am not seeing appropriate moves from Wall Street to realign to the new reality of all of this stuff that's happening. It's not just Trump. I'm using Trump as sort of a representative example, but you've got Milei in Argentina, you've got El Salvador, and all kinds of up-and-coming conservative politicians who are threatening to take over from the, whatever you want to call them, the social communist, Democrat, Labor Party, leftists, whatever, the globalists. That's a better blanket term to use for them. The globalists have invaded and taken over many governments, including Germany, much of Europe, and parts of South America, but there's a huge populist uprising in your portfolio. That's where your money is going. Your money is going to fund things for the future. That's what the stock market is. And so when you look at the US and you look abroad at international companies, the focus should be on what is going to grow the future, the next generation. And I will argue with my last breath that that isn't those magnificent seven. I'm air quoting that again. That's not those companies. They would love for them, those companies would love to control everything that we do, all of our life, our everything. I mean, between them, let's face it, I mean, between those seven companies, actually there are a few more, but the magnificent seven, they were moving toward controlling social media, internet, pharmacy, publishing, air, water, transportation, technology, social media, currency, all just everything. Their plan, and looking behind those companies, it's not fair any longer and reasonable to think of them as 7 or 8 or 10, whatever, 15 different companies, because the owner group behind those companies is all the same. So we had a global oligarchy that was looking to control the appearance of a small handful of companies that really controlled everything. The objective was to control natural resources, finance, currency, capital markets, everything. And we, the people, globally, all over the world, are balking at that. We're fighting back for our freedoms, our rights, our liberty, autonomy, our ability to make our own choices, and not be forced into a small number of companies. If you believe that we will win, then following Wall Street is not what you want to be doing right now. Right now, you should be thinking in the following terms. Wall Street is not your friend. They haven't been for a long time, if they ever were. So there was this sort of mantra, this appearance, and some Wall Street types of firms grew based on the concept that they were fighting for the average citizen. Well, they're not fighting for the average citizen. What they're doing is fighting against the average citizen and Main Street in order to facilitate mass conglomeration. And that leads us into a conversation about where we stand with Big Pharma right now. I am of the strong opinion that There are a number of pharmaceutical companies. Well, let me put it this way. In the world of investing, when you put your money in some fund, or if you are doing your own research and investing for yourself, first of all, hoorah, you should be doing much more of that and following, making sure that the people you're trusting are trustworthy. When you see trouble at a company or at an industry, you certainly don't add money to it unless you're just a huge risk taker and see something that others don't. But let's look for a moment at Big Pharma. Big Pharma represents the exact issue that I see as a major problem for the imminent future of average rank and file investors. Remember at the beginning of the conversation, I said that there are some ways that bad people do bad things to take your money. One of them is pump and dump. It's got a catchy phrase to it. You should look it up and learn all about pump and dump. There is, in my book, clear appearance that there's some kind of major, massive pump and dump being done to Big Pharma. Well, let me unpack that a little bit for you. In the world of investing, whoever is doing your investing for you, yourself or a manager, fund, whatever, your expectation is that if there's negative headlines or if there's something bad happening to that company or the industry as a whole, that you pause and maybe take some of your money off the table and maybe you reevaluate or get out of it completely. That is all in the realm of likely possibility. What almost never happens is negative headlines and negative push against a company or an industry, and then suddenly there's a huge uptick and money into that area of the market. But that's exactly what we're seeing right now with Big Pharma. Let me put a clearer, finer point on that. We have right now several different states in the US that are deciding to remove themselves from vaccine mandates for children because there's kind of this global push right now for accountability with Big Pharma. Big Pharma is suffering a massive blow to trust. Right now, I would suggest that at least in my lifetime, trust in Big Pharma is at an all-time low. You have a lot of people, not just in the US, and certainly in the US, but all over the world that are questioning the intentions and objectives of Big Pharma. Now, the continent of Africa is an interesting, very specific outlier in this because overwhelmingly, I believe that Big Pharma has been mistrusted in Africa for a long time. We're catching up in the West to the mistrust of Big Pharma. But the mistrust is there and it's growing. And in the US specifically, we now have the swearing in of RFK Jr. from the Kennedy family, who has sworn to tackle the power and control of Big Pharma. Big Pharma is now considered to be influencing politics, maybe buying off politicians. That is a common accusation, not just at the federal level, but also at the state level. Here in Ohio, there's a lot of talk of that, whether or not our state level politicians have been bought off by Big Pharma. And as that conversation grows and you have states pulling back from vaccine mandates and you have people calling for accountability from whatever it is that happened, and I know there's an array of different thoughts and opinions about COVID and its response, but there is a global call for an examination of what happened. In that light, it doesn't make any sense for pharmaceutical companies to be growing in assets, but they are. What we're seeing, and I've got a little list here, I'm going to do a deep dive specifically into this, but just looking at Merck, the major owners of Merck are Vanguard, Fidelity, and iShares, which is part of BlackRock. Johnson & Johnson is Vanguard, Fidelity, and iShares. Pfizer is Vanguard, Schwab, and Fidelity. These are a couple of the major institutional owners of these pharmaceutical firms, which means that if you're buying these funds or ones like them, your chances are good that your investment dollars are being put into these pharmaceutical companies that face major headwinds. It's counterintuitive. It's contraindicated. It doesn't make any sense. So AstraZeneca, it's Vanguard, Capital Group, Washington American Funds, and a couple of others. We've got a few others. Moderna is Vanguard and Fidelity. GlaxoSmithKline is a Dodge and Cox and Vanguard. As I mentioned, I pulled a few of the biggest owners of those at the institutional level. By the way, if you're curious about the funds you're investing in, include those fund names in comments, and we will do our best to try and pull those up and help you explore whether or not your money is being put into these. But here is a dubious suspicion that I have. I'm thinking that over those years of the Biden administration, you have a lot of people that banked a lot of money on big pharma's successes. Look at how much time, money, thought, energy, and focus went into COVID. We have COVID planning that took place years in advance of 2019, 2020. So if you are an array of billionaires that have put massive money into big pharma and are now starting to see this global call for accountability, the last thing you want to do is have your money at risk and feel that you can lose hundreds of millions or billions of dollars of your investment. So what would you do? This is a hypothesis that I'm working on, and I do plan to explore this in much greater detail. But one of the things that you might do if you are in that position and you control and can exert influence on mega globalist money managers is you would encourage money to go into those investments to prop up the share price of those stocks and buy yourself time to gradually exit without losing massive money. What does that mean for you, the average investor? What it means for you is you'll be left holding the bag. It's happened a number of times before, and unfortunately, it seems like the globalist billionaires do a really good job of creating their own profitable exit from terrible markets, and then lo and behold, you flash forward a year or 16 months or something, and markets tank, and a whole bunch of people are really upset because they've lost mega money in their 401k plan, and it feels like they have to work 5 more years to catch up in order to be able to comfortably retire. If that is true, that's what's called pump and dump. That is creating an environment where you're artificially propping up a share price of a company, and in this case, we're talking specifically about big pharma, in order for a select group to pull their money out profitably and then let the market collapse. I think there's a very good possibility that might happen. If we get a lot of people that pull back and decide that they're not going to keep doing the, whatever we up to now, 60 injections you're supposed to give your kids before the age of 2 and all this headwinds. You're talking about RFK Jr. and a lot of other people talking about the possible connection between pharmaceutical and childhood shots and injections with all kinds of early childhood developmental issues and health and psychological issues. As these investigations take place, it's fair to assume that they're going to impact the profitability of these companies. And assuming that, why in the world would these money managers be putting more money into that area of the market? It just doesn't make any sense. So looked at from that angle, I do believe we're onto something here. We're going to keep investigating. But there are a couple of things that represent problematic areas of the markets. There's big, magnificent seven, as they call them, and big pharma. So pharma is an example of where we stand right now and some of the issues that I think are percolating in the very near term in the markets. Where am I seeing opportunity? Where is the Trump-aligned portfolio? Think like Trump does. Trump is talking about revitalizing small business, entrepreneurship, startups, new ventures. That's where I believe the future of the investment dollars is. And it's no longer 10 or 15 different globalist companies getting all the money and sucking the oxygen out of the room. Now we're talking about an environment where investing focused on new business venture makes a lot of sense. So where in the past we've seen a collapsing and a demolishing of local regional banks, and I want to say something like a little over 800 regional banks closed during the Obama administration, and probably around the same number closed during the 4 years of the Biden administration. So small banks were being crushed, and it was being funneled into a small number of globalist banks. By the way, you look at those shares, that's another example of places where it doesn't make sense to be right now. Those globalist banks that enjoyed 4 years of just absorbing massive focus of capital markets and getting vastly overfunded and way too much regulatory easing for their purposes, I think that they will have their reckoning. And I think that there will be people that will rediscover the value of working with a local bank. And if that proves true, then those local banks that then again start to lend to small business, which has been another avenue of strangulation for capital markets, those globalist banks that were getting all the funding for 4 years were very reluctant, extremely reluctant, to lend to small business venture. So these are great things that bode well for the smart investor realigning their portfolio with current realities. If your portfolio, in other words, is full of the Magnificent Seven and Big Pharma and those globalist banks and financial institutions, I don't believe that you're in good shape. And I think that what's likely to happen is a tremendous market collapse and huge loss of portfolio value, which means also lost opportunity for you. When we look at opportunity, and again, it's important to recognize this is not investment recommendation, although a lot of this factors into the private membership association that is connected with this. For anybody that wants this guidance and feedback and the research that we do, it's yours. Take it, run with it wherever you are. Give it to your financial advisor, or if you're working with Matt and Drew, bring up the things that you find interesting and they will help guide you appropriately. If, however, you are part of the private membership association, that is financialpma.com, that again is designed for your privacy as an investment club. A lot of this research goes into that as well. Wherever you go, whatever you do, think in terms of investing more wisely for the projected future of the, whatever you want to call it, MAGA movement, Make America Great Again, America First, Trump, whatever you want to think of it, that is for the foreseeable future where the markets are headed. And of course, there are a number of different investments that align well with that. And we've had a few of those managers on this program, like Matt Tuttle from Tuttle Capital, who was talking about some of his exchange-traded funds. If you're not familiar with the term exchange-traded fund, think of it like it's similar to a mutual fund. And we've had Justin Bernier on from National Security Index, who represents an investment vehicle that strips out the harmful fund our enemy types of investments. Those guys come from military background. They've done the research into things like the expanding military capabilities of communist China and how we wouldn't want our money invested in those companies that make our enemies stronger, especially as they make clear signs that they want to continue to attack us. So there are great opportunities out there. Again, I want to make this as easy as possible for you. If you're a DIY investor, take this stuff and run with it. If you want more detail, we actually have spreadsheets of the data and research that we're doing. I'll share that with you. It comes with the caveat that you're responsible for the results. And that's fine. You're used to that anyway. If you are in a 401k plan, as I've said before, ask your employer for self-directed brokerage window. Ask your employer to add those types of accounts that allow you to go beyond whatever the limited menu is in your 401k and seek out non-woke types of investments, some of the things that we've been talking about. And you can do your research and avoid the ones that I think are poised for imminent trouble. And of course, if you are interested in the Financial PMA, head on over to financialpma.com. Sign up. We'd love to have you, because the more that are in that, the more the conversation gets lively, because we talk about these things. That's the whole mission and purpose of the thing, is that we can create a private club where we discuss and talk about these things, and we can help encourage each other to make better investment choices. It's a private investment club. Whatever your path, please be safe out there. Try to do your best to understand current market circumstances. And I really, truly do hope and wish for the very best financial future for everyone listening. I hope that you are able to comfortably retire on your timetable without giving undue amounts of money to the bad people and bad actors. Thanks again for joining us for another episode of UnWoke Academy. I hope you enjoyed this one. Stay tuned for the next episode.